Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Chatting Change. I'm your host Charlie Ashby. This week we're joined by our guest Jacquie Bridgman, who is a research assistant for the University of Northampton's List Institute. Hi Jacquie, how are you?
Hi Charlie.
So how you been? Is all good?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, all back now from project kickoff meeting. So very much focusing now on women and transport and all of the issues that women face as transport users and employed in the transport sector.
Right, well let's just get straight into it. I guess the first question I have to ask would be, what problems do women face with regards to transport?
As opposed to men.
Yeah, that would be
right. So, and there are a number of ways in which transport for women is very different to that for men, and those of non-binary as well. We must include people who identify as different genders. The issues that they face, well, research already shows us, a lot of research has shown us that women make much more complicated journeys and complex trip chaining than men. This is often due to the complicated nature of their kind of daily patterns of time and space. So they'll be combining their journeys to work with dropping children off, getting shopping on the way home. They tend to make much shorter individual journeys within that, so they don't tend to travel as far as maybe men travel for a work, but they will make shorter distances because they need to be near to, say, childcare facilities. So that impacts then on their travel mode choice. It impacts on where they can find work. It impacts on a financial level as well, because they're then constrained by how far they can go in a certain time distance, which may mean they have to use methods of transport that are slightly more expensive than the alternatives if they were just making one straightforward long journey to work. So yeah, they do tend to make a lot more complicated journeys per se. So there's not only that sort of side of getting to work and using transport in that way. Another issue that they face is particularly around safety. So safety for women, particularly on public transport, we know is an issue, and certainly is a very big issue in developing countries. We've had some research that have been looking at that have shown that up to 90% of women travelling on public transport have experienced harassment. So that's not insignificant to for women to report that, and that's what's been reported. So in actual fact, where it's not been reported, then it could possibly be higher. So particularly in developing countries, they are constrained by their socio-cultural status, so they may not report these incidences, but they are experiencing it. And we've also seen, for example, in countries such as Turkey, campaigns launched on public transport to stop manspreading. Now, listeners might wonder what manspreading is. It's men occupying a space, occupying a seat on a bus or a train, and actually using their size to fill that space and actually encroach on other people's space. So as a woman, you might well be kind of hemmed into a corner or, positioned in quite a tight space by men either side of you. And it's not an attractive thing to witness, and it's certainly not attractive when you're sat next to much larger people on public transport who are determined to take up all that space. It's just being polite. So if we've got to that position where we have to have campaigns to tell men how to sit on a bus or on a train, then I think we actually have a problem, and we're actually acknowledging that there is an issue with the way men and women then use public transport. So yeah, it is an issue. Safety particularly. Therefore, as well with safety, women will kind of how's the word I'm looking for? Women will kind of change their kind of travel behaviour according to how they perceive they might feel safe. So, for example, they might not travel at night because they don't feel safe, where the bus might drop them off. They might not be able to get from that bus stop to home very easily. The pathway might not be lit. Travelling late at night, there's not going to be many people around to ask if you get into any difficulty. Again, there's the fear of harassment on public transport. I mean, we know that happens. But it's not just on the public transport, it's getting from public transport, that sort of last few yards or mile from the bus stop or the train stop to home. If you don't feel safe walking that distance, then you're not going to do it. So you are therefore going to be constrained by using public transport only at the hours that you feel safe. So that might be during the daytime working hours. So again, you're restricting your movement, you're restricting opportunities for employment, where you might be offered the opportunity to work shifts, but because the shift doesn't finish till 10 and your only option is to get back by public transport, you might not feel safe doing that. Now, that's very much a cultural thing as well. I've recently been in Lisbon. That felt incredibly different to Northampton. So in Northampton, there's no way I would personally get a bus back at 10, 11 o'clock. That's if they ran that late.
Yeah.
Whereas in Lisbon, it's quite normal to see women walking around the street, young women, older women, at midnight, walking home from work because bars and restaurants are open that late. So, their employees are walking home or getting public transport home at that time of night, and that's quite normal and that's quite safe. So there is a big cultural difference in various parts of the world where we can learn from, and certainly developing world can learn from. So those are a few of the issues that are faced by women in transport, and that's not even looking at the transport sector.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that you were saying about how like obviously in third world countries there's a social divide in certain cases, and that's why it's unsafe in certain places. But I mean, even in Northampton, we're in the UK where we're supposed to be one of the highest respectable Western countries, and we have a big sort of problem when it comes to
we have a similar problem. I mean, in developing countries, I mean it's wrong to say it's accepted practice that this is what happens and this is what women have up to now experienced. That's changing. Here we wouldn't expect that level of problem. However, we still expect that there will be a problem with our safety in terms of whether we're going to be mugged or whether we're going to, be attacked. Harassment on public transport is not just the physical; it's the kind of the mental and all of those things. And we still get it. I mean, there's this practice of upskirting. Yeah. I mean, that happens in public, and we've seen that happen in, people have been on the tube, for example. Harassment can be experienced in many different ways. Some of it seems to be more culturally situated in certain places. We might not expect to experience the same type of harassment that women face in India, for example, but we still experience it in the same, in a different way.
I guess we've got our own little cultural elements as well. Like I suppose, like you were saying, harassment. Yeah. I guess like people on public transport, maybe wolf whistling or sort of.
Yeah, that's another classic example. Catcalling, all of these things. Yeah, they are harassment, and none of it is acceptable. So we have to look to change that now.
And I wouldn't be. I mean, I guess the divide there between men and women. I guess men wouldn't have these sort of problems.
No, I mean, it's difficult to say because I mean, some men will turn around and say, yes, we do.
Yeah.
By and large, they are, much more oriented towards women, and actually not just women, but LGBT community as well experiences a lot of this. So it's not just women that experience this. I mean, actually, it can be any form of harassment. I mean, harassment towards older people, for example, ages. So it's not just women. It is large sections of the population. So yes, it can be towards men. Particularly if it was older men taking too much time to get off the bus, for example. Because you're not sure and there's no easy way of getting off if you're not feeling particularly kind of confident about jumping down steps and things. So then that comes into accessibility as well. So I mean, harassment's harassment, whether it's directed at one gender or another. It's still unacceptable.
Exactly.
but yeah, I mean, in this context, yeah, we are talking about that, which is aimed at women and to an extent the LGBT population too.
Yeah, of course, this harassment is in all forms. I just assume that it sort of tilts towards women and sort of, like you said, groups, LGBT groups that are often underrepresented.
Yeah. I mean, we have heard examples of young people young gay people who have experienced harassment on public transport, and that has then impacted their decision to attend counselling classes, for example. I do know of one example of that where a young person was totally put off using public transport because of the abuse that was directed at them, and then that impacted on their journey through whatever issues it was that they were dealing with. So stamping out harassment, I think, should be a top priority on transport, well, in general.
It's interesting how, like, for some person who's maybe behind the harassment, for them it's just an average day. Like, they wouldn't even think about that. But for someone else, it could impact them profusely.
And sometimes I don't think people even realise they're doing it. Sometimes, obviously, it is more overt, but the manspreading thing, for example, that's classic. Yeah, don't even realise that they're doing it. I mean, I was so tempted recently. I was on a train and there was a man sitting opposite me. The train was absolutely packed. People were standing everywhere, all around. But this chap was taking up 2 seats with his legs, widely splayed, and his briefcase on the other chair, on the other seat. And there's millions of people all wanting to say to him, "Excuse me, mate, do you mind moving your bag?" But nobody dared actually confront him and say, you're taking up a space that could be occupied by somebody who, might actually want to sit down.
Yeah.
But he didn't even register that might be an issue. So yeah, it just comes down to being more mindful of other individuals, doesn't it? And being respectful. I mean, he probably had his head still in his work mode or whatever, but it was actually downright rude.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need a bit of empathy.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
We're not just talking about, like, societal problems in terms of people getting on public transport. There's also the issue of the transport sector itself.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a gender divide when it comes to men and women working within that transport sector?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we're looking to address in our project. Women make up 47% of the workforce now. Within the transport sector, it's 20%. So there is a massive divide in terms of the numbers of women who are working within the transport sector, and that could be in any capacity. It can be truck driving, train driving. It can be working in management roles within transport companies. It could be selling tickets. It could be absolutely any capacity, any role within that sector. And I mean, it's a huge difference. It is changing. It is improving. But 20% within the UK is still very low, and it's below the EU statistic, which is around 22%. So not hugely below, but it's significant. And I mean, it should be equal. Why should it still be so low? And we have to look at the perceptions around women in the transport sector, jobs for the boys, and all of that goes with it. I mean, many roles within transport, within engineering, are positioned as being dirty jobs. They are sort of hard. They're you're going to be outside working in freezing conditions as engineers. You're going to be working unsociable hours, driving trains and trucks, and it's a mucky job that nobody really wants to get their hands dirty and do. And it comes down to that old thing of, right, men put the bins out, women don't do that sort of thing. That's a thing.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of perception around all of that, if you want to bring it right down to that. But there's no reason why women can't do those jobs, and women do very successfully do jobs within the transport sector. There are many women who run haulage companies and logistics companies, and there's a very strong presence for women within that sector. In the airline industry, it's far worse, and this is something we're not probably going to address in the project that I'm working on, but it's a very significant area of interest. You know, when you've got data on airline pilots, for example, in the US and the UK, if you look at the data, it's around 4% of airline pilots that are women. That's very, very low.
Yeah,
very low. But if you want to look at women, so that's pilots. So if you want to look at women who are within management roles within the airline industry, that's even worse. I think the figure that we had of CEOs or MDs within airline companies was around 15 women. If you want to go back to about 2010, and that's got worse. We've now got about 94% of airlines are led by men. So why aren't women working in this industry? Why, when women make up the predominant kind of staffing numbers in cabin crew, for example, why are they not pilots? So you can't use the argument that, oh, it's inflexible working, etc., because women are up there in the skies all day long, you know? They're in the same plane as the pilots. So where is this difference? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because if you're going to work in flexible hours, you're going to work in flexible hours. Now, one thing that I did notice that's quite interesting is around maternity leave.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are, one thing that did come out, so if you are a breastfeeding mother, for example, if you are cabin crew, or if you have any kind of land-based job, for example, you can normally work around that, or an employer can support you in ways that you can maintain that when you return to work. If you're an airline pilot, and many of the airlines apparently don't have the option for their pilots or for some of their female crew to have a space to be able to maintain their breastfeeding practice, within their day-to-day kind of working. So, and also they don't have to offer them a land-based job while they are breastfeeding their child. So it's basically you come back to work and you stop that, or you change your job. So it may well be that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done around that. I mean, we're only really touching on that in terms of a research avenue at the minute, but yeah, if you're preventing women from being able to carry on and kind of look after both kind of their job and their family life there, support both, then yeah, that's an issue that we do need to address. But I think it's actually more than that. I think it's still, it comes back to how girls are encouraged into the STEM subjects, so that's science, technology, engineering and maths.
Yeah. How
they are kind of supported into getting into those careers while still in education. I think that's where it comes down to it. If you still talk to girls and boys, boys will still say, yeah, I want to be the pilot, and girls will still say, I want to, be cabin crew. There may be cultural reasons behind this, but I think there are also some studies will say that women are more empathetic, women are much more natural conversationalists, women are much more happy to be caring for people in that respect, so looking after people while they're on board. But there are probably, I don't know the percentage difference in male to female cabin crew, for example, but there's a lot. Whenever I go on a plane, there's a lot of male cabin crew. Yeah. So, it's an interesting area to unpick as to why women don't become pilots, don't become train drivers, because that's another area of issue. Again, it comes down to the long hours. It comes down to, having to stop over, at the end of your shift, all these kinds of things, which have an impact on, trying to kind of foster that work-life balance and support your family. And that is a bit of an issue. So I think it's twofold. It's encouraging children and breaking down these stereotypes in education, but also it's supporting women further in work, and not only that, but it's supporting their partners as well. So
exactly, yeah. Do you think that representation has something to do with this as well? The fact that young girls don't get to see themselves
Yeah.
As like you said, if kids are saying, "Oh, I want to be the pilot, I want to be the cabin crew," it's probably because they're used to seeing women as the cabin crew, men as the pilots.
Yeah, that's certainly a case, but it's not so prevalent perhaps on a day-to-day basis, because I mean not all kids kind of fly all the time, but yeah, I mean those are sort of statistics, so those are stereotypes rather, I should say. But if you look at bus drivers, for example, there are plenty of female bus drivers, so kids get to see bus drivers more than they do probably pilots, because I mean, let's face it, you very infrequently see a pilot these days, you know. They're not even often there to see you off the plane, you know, so it's only when they speak to you over the tunnel that you realise that they're male or female. But you're more likely to encounter a female bus driver or truck driver or train driver, for example. So, you know, if kids can see that as a normal role and see that, yeah, I could do that, then, yeah, these things will change. You know, so it's actually, yeah, having a presence out there. But it's also other male-dominated sort of occupations, isn't it? Like very recently there was a story about a young girl who always wanted to be a firefighter, and she had a conversation with her mother, and her mother had said, "Well, why don't you want to be one? You know, why have you changed your mind?" She changed her mind. She said, "No, I don't want to be one because they're all boys. It's a boys' job. Boys do that kind of job." And this got picked up via social media, and the fighting force within her local area, I think it was in the UK, they picked this story up and said, "No, look, come and speak to all of the women that are firefighters in our force." And it kind of opened this young girl's eyes to the opportunity that was there right in front of her, that women can do this, and women are doing this. And so, yeah, this young girl had got this idea in her head that women couldn't do this. So that's where we need to get in. It's in the schools. We need to teach boys and girls, you know, that you can do any of these things, and, you know, the sky's literally the limit. If you want to be a pilot, be a pilot. I mean, there are various perceptions around pilots, you know. I mean, there are stories, I don't know how true they are, that you have to fund your own way through your training to become a pilot, whether that puts off women or not, because certainly women can achieve the entry-level qualifications, you know, there's no reason why they can't. So I think there's many more barriers that are, you know, that are not really very well understood yet, and need to be, certainly. But yeah, trains, trams, trucks, all of these things, women are there, they have a presence, but they need more of a presence. That's the thing.
So speaking about like getting that presence and improving on that, what can we do to improve this sort of disparity between men and women?
Well, it's interesting. I did a workshop back in November on women in transport, and we all did a round table where we kind of sat and thrashed this idea out as to how we could actually improve our opportunities for women in the transport sector. And one of the things that came up that was not actually expected to come up is actually encouraging men to support women in this role. So, for example, what we need to do in terms of paternity leave, I think that could be massively improved for men. You know, as things stand, men here in the UK get several weeks off. I think they're allowed to take. A lot of men won't take that, or maybe don't even get the opportunity to take that. If we can encourage men to support their partners who may have had children and are looking to return to work, you know, maybe a little bit sooner because it's good for their career progression, then we should be supporting men into that role to say that, yes, this is fine, do this, you know. And I'm sure a lot of men would actually relish the opportunity to spend time with their children when they're younger. I mean, this is just one avenue I'm talking about, but it is, I think, about not just improving opportunities for women to get into these roles. It's actually about educating men that they can and supporting men in that way, that they can then support their wives, girlfriends, partners, whatever, into actually having the opportunity to improve themselves. And you know, if men feel that they are able to take a more active role in their children's upbringing, then we would socially say was acceptable or has been in the past. I think that's one way in which we could definitely make a big difference.
Is there any other sort of options do you think, or do you reckon that's the sort of the main focus we should be putting on? Because, like you said, I suppose in a way, like paternal leave and that, men have kind of already got the cards stacked up for them. So
against them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the big kind of cultural shifts, isn't it? That we expect men to be the breadwinner and the provider, and I mean that's one thing that I think employers need to change their mindset on. Is saying I mean it's a good thing. I mean, when I had my children, there was no such option for men to have any time off. If you wanted time off, you took annual leave, and so of course that's very much constrained by how much leave you've got. Unless you want to take unpaid leave, which I mean not many people can afford to do. So I think improving that for men, I think, would be a key driver in improving opportunities for women, because quite often what you see happen is that women will have a career, they'll have children, they don't feel they can go back to it because the scheduling doesn't work. If they wanted to, say for example, if you wanted to be a train driver, if you were a train driver, these shifts might not be that flexible, they might not be terribly accommodating if you've got childcare responsibilities, or you've got to pick somebody up at the end of your day, because nurseries aren't open 24/7, and because they're never near enough on your doorstep that you can coordinate all of these complex trip chaining again. So that puts women off going back. Whereas if they know they've got the support and their partner knows they've got the support from their employer, then they're more likely to progress on in their career and go that bit further and actually do what they want to do and enjoy doing. I suppose the drop-off rate from when women have babies and then go back into it later on and having to almost retrain and start again, if we can break that and support women by supporting the men, I think we've got one really good route, to forging, higher careers. Because when we look at the levels of women that are in management roles, it's not great.
No.
So, of course, because women just don't get that far. Yeah. So, support men, you support women. It's,
everyone's got to put their own weight in and work together. Yeah,
everybody's got to put a bit together.
I guess the final question I'm going to ask you is, so the project you've mentioned before on the podcast, it's called Tingo. It's called Tingo,
yes. So Tingo is really an EU Horizon 2020 project. We're just kicking off at the start. We're just at the start of a 3-year process with this. So Tingo is going to create I'm going to have to quickly look at a Transport Innovation Gender Observatory. That's what Tingo stands for. And as an observatory, what that's going to do is it's going to draw data from across the world on transport from a gendered perspective. So we are looking at women's movements across women's mobility. We are looking at women working within the transport sector. We are looking at how women use public transport. So we're going to gather all of this data, and it's going to become kind of sit in this rather large observatory or data repository. So around Europe we'll have 10 hubs, and within the UK, Societal will be leading on one of on the UK hub. So there'll be 10 hubs around Europe. We will each have a slightly different focus. So one of our focuses is around rural transport and how women negotiate that. So that's just one of our little areas. I think one in France is looking at women's safety. So every country has a slightly different focus. So we will be gathering all of this data, and then we're going to be looking at it in an intersectional way and seeing what we can draw out from that data. We're also going to be putting together some citizen science workshops later on in the project. So we'll be engaging with women and others to have a look at transport, to have a look at not only how they use it, but how things such as vehicle design are sort of what I'm looking at, how that's kind of shown to women, and how advertising is shown to women for vehicle design, that kind of thing. So many things we'll be looking at within this project. It's 3 years, 20 partners across Europe, so it's a very big project. We have a sister project as well that we will be working quite closely with, which is called Diamond. and they have a slightly different focus to ours. So between us, we should start to tackle this, because this is quite a key area for the EU to actually research at the moment. And they're looking at us for some output. So the kind of emphasis on this is not what we are going to do as Tingo, because we are actually just forming this observatory, but actually what can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So we will put all that data out there at the end, which hopefully will be available open source, and we will disseminate all our research through channels as conferences and papers and publications. And and then hopefully at the end of the 3 years we may well be able to upscale it to other countries as well. So it's very exciting.
That's really cool, and that, I guess, it sort of shines a light. It's good at shining a light on the issues and what specific things are causing women to not.
Yeah, I think it will bring up quite a lot of interesting issues that we hadn't thought about. I mean, one of the immediate things, and this is a glaringly obvious one, I mean, we talk about women in transport, but somebody asked me this question recently when I was talking at a conference, and somebody said, but are you including those that identify as women?
Mm.
And I just had to suddenly have a little think about that internally before my obvious answer was, yes, of course we are. So, I mean, even in the language that we use, we have to be quite conscious that we are inclusive, and this is all about being inclusive. And it was just, yeah, of course we are including those that identify as women, because, equally it is a problem, or an area of research that needs to be looked at for absolutely anybody, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, this will bring up, I think, quite a lot of interesting topics. It's very exciting.
And now, yeah, like you said, it's great to include sort of people that are also being harassed, and it's, even though society, we're learning and expanding and sort of have to learn all these new words and stuff. It's good to help people who
may be slightly non-normative, I suppose is the word, or what we would position as non-binary.
Exactly.
That's the word. I mean, that's the word I'm after. Yeah. So we have to be completely inclusive. We should be, and that's so important. And I think that's one of our key outcomes from this.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, unfortunately, I think that's all we've got time for this week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jack, for coming on. Where can people find you to discuss these matters further?
You can find me through the Societal website, my email, and on Twitter. My Twitter should be on the webpage. If it's not, we'll put it there. But yeah, that's normally where I get more vocal.
Yeah. So reach out through Twitter.
Reach out through Twitter. Yeah, that's a good place to get me, or via my email.
Okay, great. As always, I want to thank both the University of Northampton's List Institute and Societal for helping create the podcast. You can find them on Twitter. Societal is @societal_, and @Uni4Logistics is for the University of Northampton's List Institute. And you can also find us on Facebook and LinkedIn. To find out more about us, go to our website, which is www.societal.org.uk. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon.